Yo, picture this. Massive companies with bigger egos than budgets, clashing in all-out corporate combat. No rules, no mercy, just pure unfiltered capitalism at war. Today, we're diving into some of the most ruthless business battles in history. These companies didn't just want to win, they wanted to absolutely decimate their rivals. Let's talk about a rivalry so intense it split a town into two. It all started in the 1920s when two German brothers, Adi and Rudolf Dassler, founded a small shoe company crafting sneakers that would eventually be worn by Olympians. Adi was the quiet, detail-obsessed designer, while Rudolf was the charismatic salesman. Together, they were unstoppable, until they weren't. During World War II, tensions boiled over. No one's quite sure what happened, but rumour has it a wartime argument, or maybe some sort of personal beef, drove them apart for good. Whatever the reason, they had one of the nastiest family splits in business history. Adi created Adidas and Rudolf launched Puma, setting up shop literally on opposite sides of their hometown. This wasn't just a business rivalry. Their hometown became known as the town of bent necks because people would look at your shoes to know whose side you were on. Adidas supporters wouldn't even speak to Puma fans, and people chose where they worked and socialised based on the brand they backed. For decades, the feud divided the whole town. Their rivalry went global, with both companies fighting to sign the biggest sports stars. Puma scored a major win by signing Brazilian soccer legend Pelé, but Adidas fought back, signing as many top players as they could. This wasn't just about shoes anymore, it was about total domination in the sports world. Fast forward, and both brands are still at it. Adidas dominates sports and streetwear, while Puma's carving out a niche in trendy designs and celebrity endorsements from stars like Rihanna. What started as a family feud turned into two global giants battling for sneaker supremacy. McDonald's had been dominating the fast food game since the 60s, with their Golden Arches and Happy Meals. Enter Burger King, the underdog. They couldn't match McDonald's size, so they tried to win on style points, launching their Have It Your Way campaign, positioning themselves as the Q place where customers could customize their burgers. In the 80s and 90s, Burger King started throwing shade. They took a dig at McDonald's preset menu and called out the big bad Ronald McDonald himself, as let's just say, a little too obsessed with those hamburgers. One of Burger King's wildest moves came in 2018 with the Whopper Detour campaign. They created an app where if you were within 600 feet of a McDonald's, you could get a Whopper for 1 cent. People were literally pulling into McDonald's parking lots to order Burger King. Can you believe that? The campaign went viral and Burger King racked up 1.5 million app downloads in days. Did dethrone McDonald's? No chance. Was it funny? A little. But Burger King earned a reputation as the cheeky underdog who'll do anything to get noticed. McDonald's, meanwhile, mostly shrugged off these pranks, sticking to their signature style. When they did clap back, it was subtle, like suddenly expanding breakfast just as BK was trying to make it a thing. And remember the McRib? Its limited time comeback would suspiciously coincide with the Burger King campaign, as if McDonald's wanted to say, "Oh, you have a new menu item? That's cute. Here's a McRib." In the late 90s, Blockbuster was untouchable. They had thousands of stores worldwide, and Friday night just didn't hit right without a trip to rent a movie. Then in 2000, this little company called Netflix came knocking, offering to sell themselves for $50 million. Blockbuster laughed themselves to the point of soggy pants. Netflix, shunned but undeterred, went all in on a mail-order DVD rental service. Then, in 2007, they made a bold move into streaming. Meanwhile, Blockbuster clutched one of their stores for dear life and was convinced streaming was just a fad. By the time Blockbuster launched their own streaming service, Netflix had already captured millions of subscribers. Blockbuster just couldn't catch up. They filed for bankruptcy in 2010, and now there's just one lonely Blockbuster left in Bend, Oregon. As well as being immortalized in TikTok 2000s nostalgia compilations. Netflix didn't just win, they wiped Blockbuster off the map. And to add insult to injury, Netflix became a multi-billion-dollar streaming giant, while Blockbuster became a ghost. The lesson here? Never underestimate the power of convenience or the determination of an inspired startup. Also, maybe don't laugh off the competition too quickly. It's the mid-80s and Nintendo is running the gaming world with the NES. They've got Mario, Zelda, Metroid, household names. Nintendo's wholesome, family-friendly vibe made them every parent's first choice. But then Sega shows up with the Genesis in 1989. They've got one mission: make Nintendo look like it's for babies. Sega didn't just compete, they went full goblin mode with their Genesis does what Nintendo don't ads. A low blow to Nintendo's family-friendly image. Then came Sonic, Sega's answer to Mario. Sonic was fast, cute, and didn't have time for plumbing jobs. Sega was pitching itself as the cool console and it was working for a time. Nintendo fought back by doubling down on high quality games and characters like Link, Samus, and of course Mario himself. It was family fun versus Sega's streetwise blast processing speed. Each system had its loyal fans and their rivalry spilled into schoolyard debates everywhere. Kids declaring themselves either Team Mario or Team Sonic. For a brief, glorious moment, Sega was gaining ground. Nintendo responded with the SNES, dropping classics like Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country. The 90s became an arms race with Sega and Nintendo constantly one-upping each other. Sega even created add-ons like the Sega CD and 32X to try to pull ahead, but they were commercial disasters. Then, Sega's overconfidence got the best of them. They launched the Sega Saturn too early, watched the release, and all of a sudden the PlayStation swooped in and became the new king. By the early 2000s, Sega was out of the console game for good. But we'll always remember the 90s as the golden age of game companies taking little jabs at each other, something you certainly wouldn't see a lot of today. In the 80s, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were actually friendly, with Gates even writing software for Apple's early computers. But when Microsoft launched Windows, a familiar looking graphical interface, Apple accused them of copying. Cue years of "you stole my look" arguments. It was like a fashion feud, only with operating systems. This rivalry is less business war and more tech soap opera. In the early days, Apple was cool, groundbreaking, with a sleek design and a user-friendly vibe. Meanwhile, Microsoft was all about functionality and software, targeting business users. But then, in 1985, Microsoft launched Windows. Apple wasn't happy. Apple leaned into its rebellious image, airing the 1984 commercial at the Super Bowl, framing itself as the revolutionary fighting a corporate overlord. By the early 2000s, things really got personal with Apple's "I'm a Mac and I'm a PC" campaign. Apple portrayed the Mac as chill and laid back, while the PC was stiff, corporate, and well, boring. This ad campaign struck a chord with the younger audiences, branding Apple as the Q choice. But here's the twist: Microsoft still dominated the business world, making billions from PC software sales. Believe it or not, Microsoft actually saved Apple from bankruptcy. In 1997, with a $150 million investment, the two companies played buddy-buddy for a while. But by the 2010s, Apple had the smartphone revolution, and Microsoft owned the PC market. In the end, they're both tech titans, and we're all left wondering, what kind of world would it be if they just merged? Way back in the day, Sony was the king of TV. Their TVs were top-notch and they owned the high-end electronics market. But in the early 2000s, Samsung, a South Korean electronics company, saw an opening and emerged from the shadows. Sony was focused on quality, but Samsung, they wanted to dominate through tech innovation and aggressive pricing. Samsung started investing heavily in LCD and plasma technology, leading the charge in flat panel TVs. Sony, meanwhile, was slow to pivot. They were stuck in their ways, convinced people would always prefer the traditional CRT technology. But soon enough, flat screens took over living rooms worldwide. By the mid-2000s, Samsung had overtaken Sony in TV sales, using their edge in LCD production and relentless focus on affordability. Sony, once the golden child of the TV world, couldn't keep up with Samsung's rapid pace of innovation and aggressive marketing. Samsung didn't just surpass Sony, they buried them in the TV market. Sony still makes high-end TVs to this day, but Samsung now has a lion's share of the market. This war shows just how quickly a tech giant can lose its throne if it can't adapt to new trends, or refuses to see them coming. Today, each focuses on different strengths. Sony with PlayStation and cameras, Samsung with smartphones and appliances, but that competitive spirit still lingers like old, unresolved tension. It all started in the 1800s. Coca-Cola was the new medical drink loaded with everyone's favourite white powdery nose beer substance that will be sure to keep you wide-eyed and full of pep. Then, in the 1890s, Pepsi hit the scene. They were both soda upstarts with big dreams, but things didn't heat up until the mid-20th century when they were ready to battle for the throne of sugary domination. Things got a little spicy in the 1970s. Pepsi launched the Pepsi Challenge. They set up taste tests in grocery stores across America, getting people to sample unmarked cups of each soda. Pepsi often won the challenge surprisingly, and the public started to shift in favour of Pepsi, and Coca-Cola was not amused. In 1985, Coca-Cola thought, if Pepsi's winning, we should change our formula entirely. Enter New Coke, a recipe overhaul that no one asked for, but Coke was convinced would be a hit. The reaction? People lost their minds. They called Coca-Cola a traitor. Blasphemy, they said. Protests were held, like actual protests, to bring back the original. Eventually, Coca-Cola caved and re-released the original recipe as Coca-Cola Classic, and sales soared. Pepsi tried to capitalize on the chaos and initiated the ad wars, investing millions in what some, not me of course, could label cringe. Packed celebrity endorsements and Super Bowl ads with Michael Jackson, Madonna, every big name. This war wasn't about taste anymore, it was about branding image. Who could go bigger? To this day, Coke and Pepsi still duke it out, churning out bizarre flavours and launching over-the-top ad campaigns. Although Coke has held onto the sales crown, Pepsi has kept things fresh and edgy, always aiming for younger audiences. Today, they've each found their niches, with Coke as the traditional favourite and Pepsi as a cool alternative choice. Their rivalry isn't as fierce as it was, but they still circle each other, occasionally taking the odd jab. Honestly, I don't think it runs that deep. People are probably just loyal to whatever is more convenient. The difference is negligible in my opinion. There you go. From sugary sodas to streaming supremacy, these companies didn't just compete, they waged war. And while we got our PlayStations, Whoppers, and Netflix subscriptions out of it, these companies got to prove just how far they'd go to win. Isn't there some sort of saying about war bringing innovation? I don't know. Corporate rivalry might sound brutal, but without it, we'd still be renting movies, eating burgers their way, and playing games on consoles without a blue hedgehog. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, and if you're feeling inspired, maybe start a rivalry of your own, who knows? Might just make history.